Happy Wednesday, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Our webinar will begin shortly. Looks like we have a lot of people coming in. Thanks again for joining us. Happy Wednesday. We just have a friendly reminder. Make sure that if you have any questions for our speakers, please use the Q&A box located at the bottom of your screen. As you are seeing at the moment, our chat moves really quickly, so it's difficult to get to those questions. So please put those in the Q&A, not the chat. Again, thanks for joining us today. Good day and hello again. Welcome to another episode of HRCI Insights. These are episodes that provide insights on current HR services, developments, and technologies. We thank you all so much for joining us today. I do have a couple of housekeeping items before I introduce our speakers. This is an interactive session. Please use the chat box to talk amongst yourselves. Tell us where you're tuning in from, and if you have any questions for today's speaker, just make sure to use that Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. The chat is also a great way to expand your professional network and to learn from each other. Just please ensure that you keep all comments professional and respectful. Any bad actors will be ejected. Also, we want HRCI Insights to be accessible to everyone, so we have closed captioning running. If you do not need this resource, please click on Show Captions across the bottom of your screen and then choose Caption options to hide subtitles. If you are new to HRCI, we welcome you. If you're a returning attendee, we're so happy that you could join us again. We thank all of you for learning with us. My name is Megan Hayes. I'm the Director of Corporate Sponsorships here at HRCI. Today, we are leading the charge, managers' vital role in building high-performance teams. I'm very pleased to introduce our speakers today, David Brown, Adri Glover, and Justin Green. David, he will take it from here, and welcome to you all. We're so glad that you could join us again.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Megan, and thank you so much, everyone from HRCI. This is actually our second webinar with you all this year, and we honestly love our time with the HRCI audience. Like Megan mentioned, we love for our webinars to be interactive. So if you haven't been on a webinar with us, we do ours sort of Q&A style for the first bit between me and the speakers, and then we'll open up at the end for some audience questions. So like Megan mentioned, use that Q&A box. We'd love to get to your questions after, but also during the session, please just put your thoughts in the chat. We'd love to hear what you all think, what's working at your companies. And we just love just really how supportive the HRCI audience is with one another. And so before we dive into the topic, I'm so happy to introduce our speakers for today. So my name's David. I'll be facilitating the discussion. I am calling from Jacksonville, Florida. I saw a few other Florida people in the chat where it's finally feeling like winter. It's 50 degrees today. But just really excited the sun's out, which means that this webinar is going to be great. And so let's pass it over to our speakers. And so we'll start with you, Adri, but in the spirit of the Super Bowl being in a few days, I know it's all in the news because of a small pop star, Taylor Swift. But I would just love to know, what is your favorite appetizer or snack to bring to a Super Bowl party, just to any party? And then just let the audience know just where you're calling in from.
Yeah, thank you, David. So hi, everyone. My name is Adri Glover. I'm the head of people here at Bonusly. We're so happy to be here with HRCI today. Oh my gosh, do I have to choose one favorite appetizer or snack? I would say for me, I'm a huge fan of cauliflower bites. That is definitely one of my go-tos. And we have friends that make their own hot sauce and actually brought some over. So I'm really looking forward to that for the Super Bowl.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And how about you, Justin?
Okay, so my name is Justin Green. I am originally from the Bay Area, but I am located in Los Angeles right now. I didn't see too many shout outs from LA, so we need some more participants. We need a cohort of LA people on this. Appetizer or snack, I'm gonna keep it really simple. Onion dip. So full fat sour cream, Lipton onion dip or onion packet. You make it the day before, so that has 24 hours to marry. And it is, I think I dream about it. It's the best. Classic Lay's potato chips. It's the winner.
You cannot go wrong with that. I remember growing up, my mom made it all the time, and she would always put it like with her burgers too. Like she was obsessed with it.
Oh,
Um, but I
this
love
is
it.
the best.
I love in the chat there was so many things, but there was lots of dips, and I will say one of my favorites is cheese curds. I saw that mentioned a few times. And I, for the first time, went to Madison for a conference a little over a year ago, and I had never had cheese curds before. And I came back home with 5 bags of cheese curds. But I do love the cheese curds, so shout out to everyone. I
It's
see in the chat
amazing.
Madison, Wisconsin. But great, thank you both so much for that, and we are just really excited about today's topic. And so we've been hearing, especially at Bonusly, just a lot about high performance teams, which sounds great, kind of a buzzword right now. We're not really sure what it kind of means. We just know everyone really wants a high performance team. And so we just really want to talk today. We've done lots of research, lots of research based off of the new Gallup poll that came out, a lot of manager specific research. And so we just want to talk about really how managers are the vital role in building a high performance team at your companies. And so, like I mentioned, we do ours Q&A style. And so we'll start with you, Adri, with this first question, but let's just jump right into it. To you, what is a high performing team and what are some key signs of one?
Yeah, thank you, David. It's a great question. And as you said, this could mean a lot to different people. It's a buzzword right now. And, I would say for me, it's really an environment where employees share a strong sense of purpose and feel aligned with company core values, passion for the mission and culture as a foundation. It's really about focusing on an environment where employees can really bring their best selves to work, be most productive, be motivated to meet and exceed goals. If I think about that a little deeper from a culture standpoint, it's really, looking at specialized expertise, looking at complementary skills, looking at ways that teams are collaborating, innovating, producing great work, and really raising the bar to exceed expectations. A big thing that I read recently in Harvard Review is that trust is really an essential component of high performing teams. Being able to not only have that at the manager level and with direct reports, but also between peers and colleagues is huge. It's really no surprise as we think about high performing teams that culture really goes hand in hand with this, having senses of being challenged, feeling recognized, feeling appreciated, and that high performing teams as a whole is what we all strive for, but they tend to also really be rated by employees as great places to work. So I'll take a moment to pause there, and Justin would love to get your thoughts as well.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. And so I'll kind of go in a little bit of a different direction so I don't repeat what you said. And thinking about the day to day, like what does work actually look like for these teams, for high performing teams? And I'll go think about it from the manager perspective. And really from, if I ask a manager, what are your team members' interests? What are their strengths? What are the areas where they're still learning? And having a manager that can really answer those questions is huge. Then I'm like, okay, you understand your people, you understand the different levers that you can pull within this group. I always talk to managers about, is your team working on stretch projects? Do they have some projects that are really in their wheelhouse, so they're feeling really balanced in that way? And then ultimately, aligned priorities and aligned goals, which again are sort of bigger sort of buzzwords. And what we need to drill down into what those mean. But yeah, I think aligned priorities, aligned goals, and making sure managers deeply understand the strengths and weaknesses of their team so they can kind of pull the different levers there and support where they need to support.
I love that. And even just looking at the chat while you both were answering, there was a very common theme that everyone said, and that was trust. And we will talk about that later on in the presentation, but that really is one of the huge parts because trust just leads to so many other things, you know. And one of the definitions that we pulled from SHRM actually is high performance work team refers to a group of goal focused individuals with specialized expertise and complementary skills who collaborate, innovate, and produce consistently superior results. And one of the big parts that stood out in a lot of our research really was collaboration. You know, trust and collaboration, communication are really some of the huge signs that a team is high performing and what leads to high performance. So thank you both for just your input on that one, and we'll get right to the next one, Sheston, and we'll start with you. But speaking of high performance teams, you mentioned managers. What are some of the common challenges that managers face when they're trying to build and lead these high performing teams, especially in today's dynamic work environment?
Yeah, and I think at a baseline, managers are always dealing with very high stakes competing priorities, right? They have to get their own work done. They have to manage up to their leadership team. They have to translate objectives from the leadership team to their team for that team to execute on work. They need to make sure that work is moving along. They need to be reviewing that work. So lots of being pulled in a lot of different directions. And how do you really balance and juggle all of that? And then let's add on today's challenge, right? I think we always have a today challenge, and today's challenge is hybrid work. We went from going into the office to being at home to now this new environment that we're in. And I think it's really complicated. This is not easy stuff to tackle. And so, you know, I can go in so many directions for this, but I have a lot of compassion for managers right now. It is super hard to address the hybrid work. So once again, I always get very tactical. What are the takeaways? What can we do? And I think right now, more than ever, planning and prep is critical. Planning and prep goes by the wayside when we are busy. And I think it's more important than ever right now to make sure that you have, you know, prepped agendas, prepped plans, prepped one-on-ones. And the way I think that really helps with this hybrid environment is planning ahead to be in the office together. If we are going to have some flexibility with the days of the week, maybe we pick one day that we're all in the office together. Some planning ahead to make sure that our time together feels really valuable and useful. And I think lastly, you know, we can't solve this in isolation. So make sure as managers, you're talking to your peers, you're talking to other people at other companies, you're talking to your HRBP. We can't solve this in isolation, but we also can't wait for a systemic solution, right? So there has to be somewhere in the middle where we're leaning on people and we're getting support and we're taking some personal responsibility and accountability to address these challenges, while maybe organizations are catching up with these big changes.
I love what you shared. And I also empathize a lot with people managers right now. You know, no one knows your team better than you in terms of their engagement, their performance, how they're feeling in the culture day to day. And to add, I would say that, you know, you pointed it out beautifully, from going through so much change, from COVID to all working remote to the great resignation to now in hybrid workplaces. It's definitely a challenge for managers to understand, how do we really navigate these landscapes? I'll add that in the HR space, we've also gone from the great resignation to now seeing companies make a lot of very tough decisions, including layoffs and budget cuts. And that means that resources are constrained. Employees sometimes are having roles consolidated. They're doing a lot on their plate, and managers, again, are individual contributors and people leaders. They're the face on the ground that are supporting and enabling our people, helping to instill confidence through a lot of change management, while also remembering that they're employees themselves, right? So I really think that as we think about the people manager role, it's important, to Tristan's point, that we really lean in. We try to do our best to have a sense of connection. We shouldn't just take for granted that connections are happening. We should really be active in raising our hands and thinking, whatever's going on in my mind may be going on in that other people manager's mind, on the other side of that screen, right? Like having a sense of trust and vulnerability to open up and not struggle through things is really huge. And I think that one thing that really can help people managers is just fostering and leaning into the sense of core values, leaning into those aspects of trust, recognizing that we are going through, an economic shift right now. We are going through a lot of change management in each of our companies. We have increased roles, we have increased responsibilities, there is uncertainty, right? I think that being upfront and candid in terms of those shared experiences as people managers, as people leaders is huge in order to enable and support ourselves as well as our direct reports and teams.
Totally agree. And I will drop this link in the chat real quick, but this is just looking at the chat again. Definitely a lot of you resonate really with these stats that are on the screen. And they all came from this report that Gallup came out with, which is their latest workplace employee engagement, just stats. And just a lot of big takeaways that really just resonate really with what you all were saying in the chat and what our speakers just said. And they are kind of astounding. 51% of managers say that the restructuring of teams has really been a big complication of post-pandemic. We're work from home, we're hybrid, we're in, like, there's so much just pendulum swinging just in that area. But like Adri mentioned, with budget cuts and doing more with less, like managers really bear the burden of a lot of that. And even these other two stats where 64% say that employees have additional job responsibilities, which end up, adding on to the manager's responsibilities. And then 70% just really don't have the training they need to lead this hybrid team, and there really is a lot of just a burnout problem going on. And that was what our last webinar was, with HRCI last month. There is so much burnout going on right now, and especially with managers. And we'll get to that a little later on in the presentation, but just really interesting to see how what everyone was saying in the chat, what our speakers said, really line up with Gallup's latest report, which we did link in the chat. So feel free to read through that on your own after this. So back to one of the first questions that came up, we're talking about high performance teams. One of the biggest things we talked about was trust, collaboration, communication. And I know there's already a question in the Q&A that lines up with this, but we'll start with you, Adri. But how can managers foster trust, collaboration, and communication with their teams?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the first thing that we really need to consider is relationship building, right? Making sure that we are fostering relationships and not taking for granted that, teams are automatically collaborating. They are in touch, especially in this hybrid remote environment, as we've been talking about. I think that one thing that's really important that resonates on the ground to employees is recognizing that we're employees and we're human too. So if you think about being in that people manager role, it's important that we see ourselves in that leadership role, but that we also have that trust and ability to lean in, right? Being open and honest. Pulse checks are great to get a sense of how are we feeling as a team. I think setting the stage and leading by example is a really, really tremendous way to just kind of open the floor. One thing that we do here at Bonusly in our one-on-ones is we set the stage of, pulse check 1 to 5, how are you feeling? 5 being great or excellent, and 1 being like not really at my best. And it's really, I think, very humbling in our leadership team meetings. Sometimes you hear some people are at a 2 or a 1, whether it's, didn't quite crush that goal or got delayed on this, or we've had change management. I think that being able to just raise our hands and say that first goes a long way for our teams to know that it's okay. We are doing more with less in some ways, but it's also equally great to hear when we're celebrating those wins, right? So creating a space of knowing some days are going to be amazingly great and we're raising the bar and we're crushing it. And other times, we're on that journey together. I think that managers also just over communicating is a really important thing to do. There's a lot happening across the business. We're in hybrid, we're in remote worlds. it's really important that we stay connected. I think that you can't ever go wrong with over communication and even being in the weeds. I think that it's important that we lean in to understand what work is going on the ground. What are the pain points? Not just, taking for granted, okay, like we did an engagement survey. What does that actually mean? And I think that we need to lean in our one-on-ones as well. If I'm thinking tactically in terms of toolkits, use the one-on-one to foster those relationships. Use that one-on-one to understand, how are we progressing towards our goals? How are we feeling as people? And what's changed? Like making sure that we follow through is really huge. Transparency, I think is also really key. We as people leaders, as leadership, as managers, can do a lot to just be transparent and sharing company financials, giving employees a voice to also share feedback. And I think as a whole, fostering a culture of open feedback is really huge. Their sense of accountability, setting clear goals. On the screen, we're talking about vulnerability and trust. I think that really leaning into that human component, again, of being authentic, being human, recognizing we're employees too, and leading with empathy is really important, just to also make sure that we are taking an approach of leadership of human first, right? High performance cultures can often get blended with stress. It can get blended with employees feeling like, for me to be at my top performance, I need to always burn the midnight oil. Whereas in reality, we want to think about this being exciting, dynamic, doing great things, leaning into each other, collaborating, right? Coming to work feeling energized, motivated, passionate, right? So I think that, we have to be realistic of, again, there's a lot happening. Not every day is going to be great, that human empathy component. But again, also just leaning into examples, leading by examples is something that I would recommend and think could be really beneficial as we take that people leadership approach.
I love that. You go ahead, Justin.
Oh,
Sorry.
I was just gonna say, no, I love this slide. I especially the vulnerability, invite others to witness your thought process. I love that so much. I always look to managers, like, tell me how you think about this. Tell me how you got to that conclusion. Tell me, the work that you put into, show me how you got to that end result. So I really love sharing your thought process. I think that's so valuable, and sort of goes back to what I was thinking about for this question is, I come at this from two angles. One is, tactical process toolkit, and the other is emotional. So if you nail one and you don't do the other, you're lopsided there. You really actually have to address both. So, building trust, like having prepared agendas, maintaining trackers, never canceling a one-on-one, never canceling a team meeting. And by never, I'm, unless there's something really urgent going on, but really being there for your team, being available, being prepared, and really being thoughtful about how you're disseminating information. So, and what sort of energy you're bringing to that dissemination of information. Also really becoming sophisticated around asynchronous work, and how we organize and track asynchronous work. So we're really being respectful of people's time. And then the emotional side of building trust, one, at a baseline, building relationships, but how do you model taking care of yourself? Do you take time off work? Do you block your calendar for deep thinking work? And do you explain to your team why? Hey, don't schedule over this big window on Thursday. I have to get this huge project out and I really need time to deeply think about it. Model what it takes to be super effective, and show your team that you value that for yourself, so they are given permission to do those things. And I think also availability is huge. Are you available for your team to do the critical thinking, to be a creative thinker, to remove blocks for them? And if you're available for those things and you can model those things, I think you're a really impactful leader in terms of building trust. Modeling is so important. And then once again, I'm going to just belabor this point, but plan ahead. Plan offsites or get-togethers or gatherings that are focused around solving a critical business problem. You have to prep for that. But getting people in a room and sharing how they think through critical problems, that stuff is exciting. That is then you go back home or you go back to the office, or really when I'm in the office, I'm in a phone booth. You go back to wherever you get your work done and you're energized by that connection and that sort of understanding of how people are thinking creatively and critically.
I really love that. I was just going to add, I think that you talking about just creating that space proactively is tremendous, right? Like making sure that the teams know that you're available, your door is open virtually or physically. That really, really builds trust to knowing if I need something, my manager has my back. And I think that shared accountability is also huge. Being able to talk about our goals, we plan ahead, right? Sometimes, especially in a startup environment, there's a lot of like winding roads. And I think that as we lean into that as people managers, it's important to know that we take accountability with our teams, right? It's not somebody made a mistake, it's we collaborate, we own this work together. I think that mindset is really important for employees to know we're in this together. I have a leadership that believes in what we're doing. And I think, earlier on, we talked about trust peer to peer. That's also a huge component in building our team members up, not just saying, oh, this one person is a high performer. I think that looking at that team and group mindset really, really enables trust within that group, allows for open communication, and really, people managers are that face of fostering that day to day in the culture, whereas most of us, will get insights at all hands, bigger company meetings, department meetings. That's an awesome opportunity within your team and within one-on-ones to just talk about that openly and really get a gauge, set the stage for like what that means in your culture.
Love it.
I love it. And I will drop in the chat the link to the article that this one is from. I know a few of you asked for the Gallup one. We'll email all these stats and links out to you after this event as well. I tried to pull it up the article. But this one is the Forbes article, which is just very interesting. And it goes into depth about these 5 areas of ways that managers can build trust with their teams. And so we put a brief little snapshot on here, but there is so much good content in that article. So I'd really encourage everyone just to read through that, because like both of our speakers mentioned, like it's what's on the screen, like there's so much that managers can do to build that trust. And I saw someone in the chat, a few people were saying feedback, and we talk about that a lot as well here at Bonusly, just the importance of both positive and areas to improve kind of feedback. And a lot of that does start with trust, and we talk about that a lot, where you have to really build that trust and that camaraderie with your peers, with your manager, with your direct reports, and then with that comes like the ability to really give that open and honest feedback. And so really excited about just some more stuff that we have coming up, because I know we talk about that here in a little bit. But this next question will start with you, Shustin. But we've talked a lot about really what high performance teams are, really the importance of trust and collaboration, and so much for when it comes to managers. But how can companies and HR leaders and just the leadership of companies support managers in developing their leadership skills, especially in, like we've talked about, areas of remote work and hybrid teams?
Yeah, so I think I'm going to have a hot take here. Being in HR, being in the leadership and development world, this is my most favorite topic, right? Trainings, coaching, I love all of this stuff. But I do think that this is a complicated problem, and I think we're limited with resources. And so it kind of goes back to what I said earlier. If we can't solve this in isolation, but I don't think that we can wait for a systemic, maybe sometimes organization-wide solution. And so we have to come to the middle. And I always kind of go back to control what you can control. And we can't control the speed at which our organizations are able to address this. And so for me, I really go back to taking personal responsibility and accountability of what can I do? What can I do right now? And so I can create the most beautiful training for you. I've worked with incredible L&D teams, but if it's not something that you're interested in, or it's not relevant to what's going on for you right now, it's probably going to go in one ear and out the other. And so what I always say to managers is, take inventory, take stock of what it is that you are the most challenged with, and be really honest about the areas where you maybe fall short for your team, and work on those, address those directly. And I'll give you some examples because that might feel like too big and broad. A lot of experts in these different fields, in development fields and leadership fields, they create content. They have podcasts, they have TikToks, they have Instagram accounts. Habit stack this. Go on a 10-minute walk and listen to a podcast. Look for alternative perspectives. Build your own toolkit and your own resilience and your own emotional sophistication and intelligence, and take that on as your own responsibility. The reason I say this might be a hot take is because I know people are stretched thin and they're busy, and people are burnt out. But I think the heavy lift of taking responsibility for learning some of these skills will benefit you in the long run, and it'll make you more adaptable in the future, because this is today's problem. 2 years, we might have another complicated problem. But if you're somebody who takes responsibility for developing these skills yourself, you are going to be light years ahead of your peers, right? Because you're going to say, okay, here's a new challenge. These are the resources I used last time to cultivate and build this muscle for myself. I didn't wait for anybody. I didn't do it in isolation, and I was better off for it. So, I do think there's a lot of responsibility here for organizations, but I also think we need to take personal responsibility for the things that interest us, challenge us, and go find those resources, go find those people, and make it happen for yourself.
I love everything you shared. I think that looking at this in bite-sized chunks and thinking about it from a performance enablement standpoint is huge, right? There's so many times similarly being ahead of people where we are constrained. It's me and one other employee here at Bonusly, where we would love to be able to have a full-on organizational development learning function. But one thing that, I think is really important is recognizing that everybody learns differently, and everybody is looking at different skill sets to really help empower and enable them. So I think that it's really important to do that in bite-sized chunks. Work with your manager. Let's not wait. Let's start to get on that learning journey and build those muscles and toolkits that you need in real time. And that's leaning into your HRBP, that's working with your leader, that's also raising your hand and taking initiative, right? And helping to give feedback on areas that the company can also look to enable in broader company-wide trainings, right? I think that it's definitely wonderful to have that two-way street and to have feedback from employees on what is that take on the ground, right? I think that that's something that we as HR leaders, both of us, take strongly into consideration. We know that training can't be one time. It needs to be tested over time. And the best thing we could do, especially in these environments and in startups especially, is, take ownership, take initiative, build that together, work on your individual development plan, work with your teams on what that can be. And we don't have to wait for a performance reviewer to build that. It's so wonderful to have that continuous learning journey. I think that also one thing that I've loved seeing is sometimes there are learning circles, like once a month or once a quarter, there could be an article on a particular topic on leading in the remote world. That's an opportunity to open discussion. I really think that sometimes the teacher, the trainer doesn't need to necessarily be HR. It's wonderful that we are in those roles, but I really want to enable that conversation and that performance to be at that manager peer-to-peer level as well. And to hear what people are thinking and how they've tackled, problems driven solutions, I think is really important that we just foster that sense of openness and discussion as part of the learning and development journey. And then just to make a plug, I'm not sure if for companies out there, you have a professional development budget. I've seen in so many companies that being so underutilized. I think it's really important for us as people managers to continue to make that plug alongside HR leadership and executive leadership, right? And lean into these individual learning journeys, but also considering group learning. So for example, within our sales team, we're rolling out like a medic training. And that's a wonderful way to just think collectively about what are the needs for like my broader team? How can I like do that in one shot for everyone together and enable our company goals, but also at the individual level, On the flip side, also just making a plug for professional development to say someone on my team may be growing to that next level in their HR career. How can I empower them through HRCI, getting textbooks, signing up for an exam to help them really feel confident in their learning journey and their next steps in their growth, right? So I'll pause there, but I really love the idea that Justin put out, holistically on how to really just approach, this aspect of learning and enabling that development, leadership skills in our cultures.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you both so much. And we have just a couple more questions left. So I'll do a quick plug to remind everyone, if you have any questions for Shustin and Adri, please use the Q&A box. We have quite a few in there already. But yes, please use that box. I know there's some coming through in the chat, but make sure you put it in that Q&A section. That way we can be sure it's in the Q&A section at the end. But we did talk a little bit ago about feedback, and just how the importance of feedback, especially when it comes to managers and their direct reports and high performing teams. But what role does feedback play in the employee engagement and performance, and how can managers really ensure that they provide meaningful feedback to their teams regularly? And we'll start with you, Adri, on this one.
Yeah, of course. I think that to me, this goes back to those foundations of trust, right? And as we're looking at high performing teams, being able to really enable that in our culture starts with having the concept of an open feedback culture, right? And that isn't just top down, manager to direct report. We really want to think about feedback as being bottom up and peer to peer. And for me, it's about recognizing that we're all human and we all have blind spots. So, to be able to provide a sense of feedback really enables us to be at our best, to know that we have each other's backs, to recognize, how we could help each other grow and lean into a space where feedback is really a positive to enable each and every one of us. And I think that oftentimes we forget that feedback is and can be really positive. It's wonderful to just give shout outs. And as you're seeing things in real time, to say, amazing job on X, Y, and Z project, or I love how, this team has been collaborating to meet this really, high bar with our company goals. I think on the flip side, constructively, sometimes feedback can also be difficult, but it's important that within our culture, we establish a sense of trust. We lean into our values. We lead into that sense of building a culture of noble intent. And that, for employees, it's an opportunity to know that this is time invested in them, right? To give feedback, to take the time and care to help reflect on ways that we can help them advance, grow, develop is really important. And to recognize that, like, hey, again, I speak a lot to startup cultures because we do move fast, we break things, right? I think that it's really important to have a culture where it's okay and really important to learn and to have feedback as an opportunity to do even better. And I think for high performing cultures, again, it doesn't mean we get it right all the time, but we lean into that circle of trust. We feel open talking to each other. We recognize, we celebrate the wins, but we take that accountability together. And part of that is also having each other's backs by giving that feedback. And I think lastly, just to add, when it comes to employee engagement, recognition as a whole is really important to just feeling motivated, feeling connected in your culture, knowing that you matter and that you're on a pathway to your personal learning journey and growth steps, that your manager is invested in you. So as a whole, I think that there's so many ways to look at feedback as we've talked about, but I think that some of the tactical things we could take away are also just having a methodology for feedback. So again, I've talked about one-on-ones, having like a structured forum. I think that also just thinking about having feedback consistently, having it regularly, having it be organic, having it be like just in plain English and like, true, genuine terms, having it be authentic and also leading into empathy. Like if we're going to deliver difficult feedback, really important that like we're looking at the intent of building our teams and our people up, never breaking people down, right? And really trying to look at feedback and lead by example in our cultures of feedback being a gift, right? being able to set the stage on like asking this sense of like, I'd like to give feedback, right? And like, I think that, you know, this is really a very powerful partnership and journey, and goes a long way for employees knowing that they also have a voice and an opportunity. It's not just the traditional way of thinking, my manager's giving me feedback. I think it's an opportunity for them to be a part, you know, of the company culture, mission, values, and also raise their hand if they're seeing things on the ground that they would also like to give feedback on and have improved as well.
I think we could have a full just session on this, like we could just talk forever on this particular topic. You know, I think of feedback as the lifeblood of an effective team. It's so critical. We have to nail this. And yet it falls flat if we don't have some foundational pieces, right? Like the relationship building and the trust. So, and then it's also funny because feedback actually sort of goes against the grain of natural sort of typical social interactions that we have, right? So this isn't just something that people wake up and are good at. This is something we have to practice, really practice. And so when you have to deliver some maybe challenging feedback, please be practicing in the mirror. Practice in front of your pet. Practice in front of a family member or a friend. Practice with your HR person. Practice saying these things out loud, because we show up with all of our own emotions about feedback. And that gets in the way of what we're trying to deliver and what our message, you know, what our ultimate message is. And so practice, write it down, and then go back and ask yourself, what is the intention of this feedback, right? What behavior am I trying to change? Am I actually conveying that here? So preparation. Wow, I mean, prep is the theme of today for me. So preparing, practicing, and really modeling receiving feedback. So maybe it goes back to that vulnerability piece on the slide of share with your team some really hard feedback that you've received. Let them know what you did with that feedback. Hey, it stung. I sat on it for a few days, and then this is what I changed. I hope you guys are noticing that. If you're not, remind me. This is your permission slip to say, hey, remember you weren't going to do that anymore? Because when we get stressed, when stakes are really high, that's when we default back to our old habits, our old behaviors. And so kind of bringing them in on accountability is, I think, can be kind of fun. But so sorry, I got off track there. Yeah, I think it's something that we really have to practice, be proactive about, be prepared with, and neutrality, right? If we are in a learning environment, these are development opportunities. This is opportunities to learn from a mistake. You really have to watch the language that you're using around these things, and watch your emotions around them. So if you feel really volatile about this, you gotta work through that. You gotta clear that out before you are sharing it with your team member. I am focusing more on some of the development feedback because, in my opinion, delivering positive feedback is just much easier. It comes more naturally to me. It feels more exciting. And so it requires sort of less prep and planning for me. But even then, what is the intention of this positive feedback? What behavior are you trying to reinforce? It's really just being intentional across the board.
I love that. And I would just add on, you know, this aspect of meaningful feedback. I love how you connected that back to purpose, you know, and is that about instilling company values that were newly rolled out? Is that really making sure that like we're modeling behaviors that we want to see peer to peer, collaboratively, et cetera? And I think just also really really powerful to think about what is the deeper meaning, positive feedback, constructive feedback. I think overarching, you talked a lot about like alignment and prioritization and company goals. I think that also is really, really meaningful in terms of employees getting the feedback they need to know, am I on track? Am I doing what I need to do? Can I be doing better in this area? Should I be maybe in a team meeting, like giving a little more space to others if I know that I may be more comfortable presenting, whereas there are newer folks in the room who, should also have a space and a voice, right? So I think as a whole, just really, really wonderful how you position being purposeful in terms of feedback, as much as just ways to deliver and some of the best practices. And of course, doing that in real time, being continuous, setting the stage and making sure that feedback, isn't just given, it's something that we can also ask to receive.
Yeah, I'm gonna add one more thing. I'm sure we're at time, but you made me think of something. We also have to be understanding of people's reactions when they receive feedback. And so being comfortable with a variety of reactions and still maintaining consistent feedback. So, I've had team members who completely shut down when I've given them feedback, and that makes me really uncomfortable. And so I might be somebody then who avoids giving that person feedback because of the way they reacted to it. But you have to keep showing up no matter what the reaction is, and you have to be okay with whatever reaction you receive. I've had people comfort me, which was so sweet. I've had people completely shut down. I've had people cry. I've had people get defensive. I've had people be completely neutral about it. Everybody is going to show up however they show up with it, and we still have to keep giving feedback and building that muscle with our team.
I think I will take your advice, Justin, and I think we absolutely need to have you and Adri back and just do an entire webinar on feedback, because it really is such a loaded topic right now, especially. And I linked some things in the chat. Again, I will send those out in a follow-up email, but on our blog at Bonusly on our website, we have several blog posts that we've written recently about just ways that managers can receive feedback, and also ways and tips on how they can give feedback. We also talked about sort of the 9 ingredients of feedback. And so there's so much there. And so we have one last question, which we'll have you answer, Adri. So when it comes to feedback, we know it's both positive, constructive. We know that recognition is really a big aspect of high performing teams. And so why is employee recognition crucial for team performance?
Yeah, I think that this goes back to this element of, as we talk about high performing teams, it's the foundation of, trust, really kind of building the blocks of doing great things together. And employee appreciation recognition is really a central point to enabling employees to feel engaged, feel appreciated, feel visible for their performance, the work they're doing, and bringing that to the table, right? And I really feel that a little thank you goes a long way. I've heard feedback we've had a lot of change here at Bonusly and a lot of aspects of like role consolidation, same as many companies, right? And sometimes I hear feedback of like, I just wish, I don't mind taking on the extra work. I just wish it was recognized and it was visible, especially being in the remote environment where we're not, next to each other at a desk every day, can't just tap someone on the shoulder and be like, hey, finance, what's going on here? And I think like the biggest thing for employees, especially for high performing teams, is we're passionate about what we do. We're passionate about our mission. We care about the people we work for. And that visibility really, really goes a long way. I think that, having an employee recognition program as a whole, as HR leaders, we know that increases likelihood of overall engagement, job satisfaction, retention, referrals to your company, right? Longevity, and people also feeling like, I feel so motivated, energized. I want to continue to bring out my best in those around me. For me, as I think about recognition programs, what I love here at Bonusly is that we really have that. I hear people say the word magic. You really have that chance to just step into a world of seeing all the wonderful things people are doing and be a part of giving those shout outs, having an inclusive space. For us, we tie it to our core values. It's about not only our mission, that connection and purpose, but as Shustin and I talked about, there's a deep sense of like instilling behaviors and values that we really want to model. So for us, part of our recognition program is, being an active part in that every day and tying it to a core value, whether it's raising the bar, getting things done, spirit of collaboration. I think more broadly in terms of appreciation recognition programs, it's an opportunity to also lean into that aspect of like people first again, right? Celebrating birthdays, anniversaries, new hires, promotions, wellness programs, special awards of just going above and beyond. And as a whole, we all come to work, especially, in the spirit of high performing teams, to bring out our best, but we really, really, also want to feel like we're people first, we're cared for, that appreciation is recognized, doesn't, get lost in the trend of, again, hybrid and remote teams, especially. And I think that having a program that brings that front and center just makes people feel like even more this is meaningful, it's valued, and that again, I feel excited coming to work. I love what I do, and I really appreciate that my manager, my team, my company sees that in me.
Adri did an amazing job. Usually I give the little commercial, but Adri absolutely nailed it, I will say. And so we'll leave it at that. If you really do want some more information on Bonusly, please answer this poll. We'd love to just really show you how adding this recognition and feedback solution to your companies can really do wonders. It really gives you that window into the magic, like Adri said. And before I pass it to Megan, I will drop our LinkedIns in the chat. We would love to connect with you all. So feel free to connect with us if you have any follow-up questions. I already know I'm going to get so many questions about all the resources. So please feel free, if there's a specific one, ping me. But we will be emailing all those out as well as the recording. But we have had a tremendous conversation with you all, and I know there are so many questions in the Q&A. So I will pass it to you, Megan.
Thank you so much, David, Justin, and Adri. We really appreciate your presentation today. And thanks so much to our attendees for joining us and for the feedback. We hope that you'll continue to learn with us in future webinars. Before we get to the code, I do want to make sure we answer some of your questions. The first first question we'll kick off with is, many of these issues and recommendations seem perennial, returning over and over again in business environments. So if the issues and the best practices aren't new, what can we do to make change? And what can we practically do as HR professionals to make managers and leaders do these things? Wow, we started off with a really tough one.
It's a great question, right? Because a lot of us in the HR space, I always say we live in HR land. So we hear a lot of these terms, we hear these buzzwords, right? I think what's really important is being able to instill what that means in our individual cultures. Like for me as a head of people, I've had this role in several organizations, and every company culture is so unique. And I think that it's really important that we work closely with our leadership team. We often hear in HR that like in order to instill change, we need to be able to do that at the executive leadership level, right? And get our manager buy-in and make sure that like we are aligned in order to drive, whether it's a cultural change, a new initiative on the ground. All I can really say, and I'm very happy to continue the conversation for whoever's there. I'm sure that Justin is as well. I really think that we know the best practices. We know that each organization is going to be unique culturally, and being able to lean into that, feel confident as HR professionals, build those relationships, build that trust, build those foundations, and look to build those alignments, have your priorities and stepping stones of like how you're going to get on that journey together. And Justin, we'll lean into you for anything you might like to add.
Yeah, I think I'll add, as HR professionals, I think that we can continue to improve our own business acumen. So aligning people initiatives with the actual objectives of the business, and the closer we can connect people programs to positive revenue outcomes, I think the more influential we are at the executive level. Continuing to, I'll leave it at that. Connect it to money.
Always a good option for sure. I want to just say for the fourth time, in case you all didn't hear, The request is being made multiple times in the chat for you all to come back and do a webinar on feedback. So just please make a note. Next question is, how do you get managers to understand that people management and development is a key component of their role as managers, not just HRs?
Yeah, I'll start since I'm already off mute. I think it's so interesting because what we do is we typically take a very successful individual contributor and we put them into a manager position. I think we need to back up before that moment and really have conversations with people as to whether or not they're interested in taking on the additional component of what a manager means. Typically, people want to move, they want to advance in their career, they want to be promoted. These are going to be ambitious people. And so how do we create a path for ambitious people to continue being senior individual contributors, to continue grow and develop and get those promotions? And if they're not interested in the manager side, give them that path. Whereas then you have people who love the contribution they make from a technical perspective, but they also love this managerial side. And like, that's your perfect recipe, right? So having some of those difficult conversations before we get there, so that the only path isn't just becoming a manager and then being frustrated with what actually comes with being a manager.
Speaking about difficult discussions, I have a question related. If a high-performing employee has expressed a desire for promotion to a managerial role, but their structure does not allow for this promotion, what should they tell the employee?
Yeah, I think this is a common one that we hear. I see Justin smiling. I think that transparency is really key. I remember when I was first growing my career, my first role in HR, we were a company of, I think, like 60 employees, and that role didn't exist. But I remember my manager at the time just being upfront in terms of what our structure was, but that shouldn't hold me back from my learnings. And we went together and we did a plan. And that's when I remember using my professional development stipend to go for my PHR, right? Nice shout out for HRCI. It's wonderful. And I really think that, we shouldn't try to, we have to work within the parameters that we have. I think we can get very creative, right? And I think we really need to enable, what are those skill sets? Like, it's not to say that we're not looking to promote you, but we have to be realistic in terms of what's feasible, what makes sense for the broader org right now, while continuing to promote that growth and development, right? And making a bigger plan where maybe within one department it doesn't make sense, but with role consolidation and a lot of things happening, there's also a lot of creativity and room for us to think broader picture in terms of, this person is a top performer, we want them at the company. What can we do at that manager, HR leadership level to invest and enable them?
Very good suggestion. I want to make sure that we have time for our last couple of questions. Do you have does the panel have best practices for creating a culture of high-performing teams, culture of accountability, problem solving, critical thinking, and feedback?
I think this is definitely something we would love to tackle in more than 4 minutes. But yes, 100. It's a wonderful question, first and foremost, and there's a lot packed into that, so it deserves the care. I think that starting resources for me, sometimes just having in my back pocket, what do I want that one-on-one structure to look like? What do I want feedback to look like as a blueprint in terms of my company, right? And we talked a lot about how people receive feedback. Sometimes they can shut down. Sometimes it's, it is an opportunity where folks feel really empowered and enabled by it, right? So I think that, first of all, again, we're very happy to continue the chat, and we have some resources at Bonusly that David and I can share. But I think that, it's important to go back to your foundations and just think about, in an ideal scenario, what do I want my company culture to look like? And then what are some of those, even if it's like 1-page docs, what is my philosophy? What is my enablement strategy? What does a basic one-on-one look like? I think that those toolkits are really important, and also create this sense of just what's the word? Like overall connection, right? We know each people manager has a different leadership style. Even if you have the same template, there's going to be a different way of how we approach that. So we want to lean into creativity, but we also want to have an overarching way of thinking about how do we want our people managers to lead within the culture, and what resources, knowledge, et cetera, do we want to promote? And Justin, I'll turn over to you too, of course.
No, I think you nailed it in just a couple minutes that you had. Thank you.
Well, we are just about to wrap up. I just want to give you all an opportunity to share just final thoughts before we wrap up today's presentation. Anything that we may not have covered with the Q&A that you want to make sure that you state for our attendees today?
I think it was a great discussion. I'm really energized by the participants and the engagement in this, to know that so many people are out there thinking about these things and valuing them, and showing that they value them by showing up to something like this. And so we can continue the discussion, but it sounds like we will be doing an additional webinar just about feedback. So stay tuned.
Definitely. Any final thoughts, Adri?
I just really appreciate again everyone's participation and bringing your voices to the discussion. I think again, I feel so energized. I think it's wonderful to lean into the HRCI community as always, and to see this as a space where we are here to learn and be there for each other. So we look forward to also joining as other participants present. And, I think David will share both of our LinkedIn information, but we're very happy and excited to continue the conversation at any time.
Excellent. Well, David, Justin, and Adri, we really appreciate your presentation today and the great discussion. And we appreciate you being certified with HRCI too. It's really important because you can also give the perspective from a certified HR professional as well. And speaking of which, that activity ID, so you don't ever have to take the exam again, is 657-978. Again, 657-978, repeating for those who can't see the screen due to driving. This has been approved for 1 HR credit towards your recertification. Again, we thank the Bonusly team and their guests for joining us, and hope that you'll come back very soon. Have a great rest of your week, everyone, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you, everyone.